Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how one young widow's journey through loss and infidelity has shown her that no matter what we're going through, God's love for us is very real. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're so glad you're here with us today, and we're really excited to introduce our special guest, Sheri Ramirez. Sheri, how are you doing today?
I am so good. How are you?
Awesome.
We're doing fantastic.
Good.
Now, I'm just going to preface our viewers. If you see Sheri moving her hands around a lot, it's because she knows how to sign. So, but she's not going to do it for the show. She said she wants a break. That's okay though. So she might be very handsy and I might be very talkative and poor Scott will just, I don't know what you're going to do.
Sit here like a bump on the log. My normal job.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, Sheri, we're really excited that you reached out to us. Like I said, earlier before we started recording, Scott doesn't really know anything about your story. I wish that I had tissues when we were on the phone call. So just another little shout out to our listeners. If you don't have tissues and you might want to grab some. It was a beautiful call. I think it lasted a really long time too, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was a hot minute.
It was a good call though. I felt super pumped after.
Yeah, me too. It was so awesome. And that's just a true testament to you. So I'm excited to get to know a little bit more about you and to hear more of your story in depth. But before we get started with that, do you want to tell everyone just who is Sheri?
Yeah. So Sheri Ramirez. We currently have a family of 5. So I have 3 children and my twin boys will be 11. God be with me. My daughter's 8 and she got baptized this year. So that was super special for our family. This is our first full year in Florida. Before this, we lived in, people are probably going to wonder where in Utah. So I'll just say Taylorsville, Utah. But we lived in different states throughout our 12 years there. My husband grew up in Utah. So that's a really short way of saying that's how we ended up there for the last 12 years. Gotcha. But my dream has always been to be back to the beach because I grew up in California up until I was 18. So I teach here at the School for the Deaf in Florida, and I do life coaching on the side. I'm super excited. I just got that certification, and it's something I'm super passionate about. That's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Now, where in Florida? Because that was kind of like my stomping grounds for a long time.
St. Augustine.
Okay, so you're like the pretty part of Florida.
We're north, yeah. The beach city.
There you go. I like that part of Florida. I don't love where I was from. I was down in Southwest Florida, like the Fort Myers, Naples area and stuff like that. So it's just so humid there. I don't know.
It is.
I'm not meant for humidity. My hair does this Mufasa thing and it's just not pretty. So
I'll take it over the snow.
Really? See, I'm all about the snow. It's glittery and beautiful. I love it.
Too cold for me. I was ready for some warmth.
Oh, what about you, Scott? Are you a sand or snow kind of guy?
I've never really lived on the beach, so I can't really say.
You visited though.
I mean, yes. I've gone to the beach, but living there, I've stayed in Oxnard by the beach where my brother-in-law used to live, and he kept his windows open all the time, and there was that breeze coming through the house. So that was cool. I could get used to that. But
less heat throughout the year for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that. And so you're teaching and you're doing life coaching. You've got your 3 kiddos at home, right?
Yep.
And you just moved to Florida.
Yes. Lots going on.
Yeah. You're not busy at all.
No, never.
Very cool. All right. Well, Miss Sheri, we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to you. Why don't you tell us, where does your story begin?
All right. My story begins. Let's start when I met my first husband. This was when I was deciding to go off to college, and I wanted to get out of Riverside, be away from mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Typical going off to college, but I was the first of 5 to go off somewhere different. So it was a big deal for our family to kind of drop someone off and have them be on their own. I was excited though. I was ready to take charge of the world and figure out who I was. So I didn't know anyone. I kind of dated around a little bit. There's a little full circle here. So I actually met my current husband first, if we're starting from the beginning.
Wow, really? Okay.
We have a full circle. We dated briefly, though. My current husband, who I never thought I'd marry in my life when I was 18, I was like, there's no way. He's so immature. He is deaf, but I was learning sign language, and that's what I was going to college for. So I actually met him first online, and we met on a blind date, which was super awkward, which it was something fun to write about in my memoir as I went back in time and reliving this naive little girl, just jumping into the world. But I had never met a deaf boy before. I met deaf girls in camp, girls' camp up in Big Bear, California. And that was what sparked some fire inside of me. Like it was this language that I had known at some other time. I don't know what it was, but I knew at that time when I was about 12 that I had to learn this language.
Wow.
And I just knew there was going to be at some point I'd learn this language. My high school didn't offer it, so that's where college comes in.
Okay.
So this is where I'm about to start college. So I meet him first. And it was kind of like, well, I don't think this is going to be a long-term dating scenario, but something drew me to him.
Mm-hmm.
It was something innate inside of me that I'm just like, I can't pinpoint it. I know he's going on a mission. That was what it was. He was going on a 2-year mission. So he wasn't seriously wanting to date. But I still was like, I don't know what it is. Just beyond him teaching me sign language, I was so drawn to him as a person. Even though we were both young and he was just immature, I was still drawn to him.
Wow.
Then I think about a month later, so this is where I met my first husband, Ryan. Totally different person. Very mature. He was about 5.5 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, whoa, this older boy. I'm very intrigued with him too. Amidst being intrigued by both of these boys, there was something inside of me that was like, well, just see where both of them go. So there was kind of knowledge that everyone was kind of open to knowing that I was young and dating around. Both of them kind of knew. Dante was like, that's my current husband, Dante.
Okay.
I didn't care. He was like, whatever. I am going on a mission.
And he's going on a mission. Yeah, exactly.
It's fine. But as things got more serious with Ryan, I had to figure out how to officially just cut things off with Dante. Even knowing he was going on a mission, I still wanted to keep in touch or write to him because we had developed some sort of a connection. And it was kind of romantic, I would say. It wasn't super involved because we both knew he was leaving. But he was always someone in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I never forgot about him. And I seriously started dating Ryan. Now, Ryan, I learned one night when he decided to tell me a few months into us dating and we were getting more serious, he let me know that there was something different about him. And I always felt there was something different about him. He's such a bright spirit. And he was always so optimistic about life. And I never knew like what it was, obviously, because I didn't know. So he let me know one night. He said, I have a chronic kidney disease. And I was blown away. I'd never met someone with a kidney disease. This was super new to me, especially being an 18-year-old girl and just venturing into college. But he was so fascinating. Everything that he did was so positive, and I feel like he was led by the Spirit in so many things that he did. And I felt that Spirit right away. There was no denying how much I loved him, probably from soon after I met him. And so that was something that I was okay exploring to figure out if I could handle something like that. And what did that even mean? Someone who has a chronic kidney disease, what kind of life do they live? So he got to share with me about dialysis, which I also didn't know about, but this is the machine that cleaned his blood, and he depended on it unless he got a transplant.
Wow.
Yeah. And as things got more serious and I was very committed to him, one night we had a conversation, and I verbally let him know that I felt like he was the right person. And this was after so much back and forth. I'm just not sure. Young, is this like the person that I'm supposed to marry? That's a huge decision. But that was what I came to college for. Boy, crazy. That's just me. But I prayed about it a lot, and I felt inspired that he was the person that I was supposed to marry. So I let him know. This was when he was on dialysis. So I didn't know when he'd get a kidney disease or get a kidney transplant. Kidney transplant.
Or if he'd get one, right? Like,
yeah. I had no idea. So he was actually the next day, it was maybe 1 a.m. He called me at a weird hour. So I was thinking, like, this is not good. He's calling me at such a weird hour. But he actually called me to tell me that the hospital had called him up to say they had a transplant for him. So God was like, you're going to commit first, because that's going to be the ultimate test of committing to someone who has a disease and there's no for sure way of knowing how long their life is going to be, or just pretty much testing my faith in trusting God.
Right.
So I was super grateful for that moment, even though I didn't expect that to happen. It was a beautiful experience for him to be able to get a kidney transplant.
Wow. Did you talk to your family about this, and like, what was their kind of take on it? Because I have a daughter myself, and I think, gosh, like, I don't know what advice I would give her if she were dating someone who could potentially lose their life really early on, or have a lifelong medical, big medical thing, right, to go through. Like that. I mean, it means he may not be able to be the sole provider. It means that you're going to have to always have really good insurance on you. It means, you know what I mean? Like, you might end up being a caretaker, and like, you can't really plan things because you can't go too far from the hospital just in case. I mean, like, I can just see how many complications you would have to plan for before going into it. And especially it being, what you said, 19 at this point.
It was 18, 19.
18, 19. So like, what did your family and friends think? Like, what kind of advice did you get? Or did you just kind of make up your own mind?
No, I love this question. I think at the moment, because I feel like I was shielded with naivety, and I wasn't super worried about too far into our life. However, it was in the back of my mind. I remember talking with my mom, and she did bring up questions to me. However, I feel like she's always been one to let me go with my gut. And I'm usually the type of person that I don't really ask for opinions. I just do.
Right.
And so I believe that she knew that about me, but she was really good at asking me those questions. And it also gave me more time to ponder. Now with my dad, he is usually the same. He has an old-fashioned sense where he does want to know, are you going to be provided for?
Right.
So that was actually his ultimate question. That was his question, like in every relationship that I've experienced, if it got serious, like, are they going to be able to take care of you? That type of thing. So I believe my dad was more so like unsure about it, but he knew that I was going to make the choice based on what I wanted to do. And I felt like this separation too, being in Utah and then being in California. I felt more so like I was really on my own, and I was now venturing into this new life, my adulthood, on my own, and everything would just work out. Felt like I had such a shield of, it's all good. Everything will just
Ignorance
fall
is
into
bliss.
place. Yeah, that's where I was at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so he's on the list. They have a kidney. Is that in like an immediate thing? Like he's got to go to the hospital immediately, right?
Yes.
Okay. So take us, I guess, from
Yeah.
there.
Well, he was taken in and prepped, and the kidney took. So that was super exciting for us. I had no idea what to expect, but I was hoping for the best, and it worked out really well. His kidney did live on for quite a few years.
Wow.
We ended up getting married, and he had his kidney. And after we got married, I was about a year in. We were living in Utah. I let him know I'm super homesick. I don't like the snow. Can you please take me back to California? And at that time, he had conveniently but inconveniently lost his job. They were downsizing. And so right before the year mark of being in Utah together, married, we ended up moving to California. And that's kind of where everything shifted, and we were really out of place. There was no plan. We moved in with my parents. That was an experience that I'm grateful is past.
Yes.
But it gets a little tight when you're living in a home with your two youngest teenage siblings and parents. So it was a time that we were really trying to figure out how to provide for ourselves in an economy that's a little bit more, the price range is a little higher out there, especially
A lot higher in California.
Yeah.
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 And I feel Utah has gone up quite a bit in
It has
house
now.
prices now.
Mhm.
So I felt like it was significantly cheaper in Utah. And then going to California, I was like, whoa, I've never lived here as an adult. I only lived here, under my parents' roof. So that was super eye-opening. And insurance. I did not understand at that age the responsibility that I was taking on with a husband who had this chronic illness, that I would always have to make sure I'm getting jobs with insurance.
Right.
I had no idea how difficult that would be and how it could limit things when I was looking for job opportunities. It was always number one, do they have good insurance?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I landed at Hoag Hospital, working in Newport Beach a little while after we had moved there. That was where I finally felt like I was able to provide for my husband. And right before finding this job, something significant happened. It was very devastating, but I got a call when I was a nanny, and my mom called me on the phone and she said, hey, I'm taking Ryan to a nephrology specialist down in San Diego. Something's wrong. And I don't feel like his kidney transplant is actually filtering his blood through his body correctly. So we need to go see this specialist. And I'm just in tears. I have these 3 children that I'm nannying, and I'm just shocked. So their family came home and I was able to leave and go see him at the hospital. But I remember sitting with him on that bed. We were just so devastated that this kidney that we had hoped would bring us through so many more years had died. That was really devastating for me, for him. I know that he blamed himself for that kidney dying. I know that because he had felt like someone else had been able to give him life, and now it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's really a big loss for him.
Was it that was he not just taking care of himself, or is it just something that happens sometimes? Like sometimes it works and then it just doesn't.
Yeah, we weren't given a ton of information, and it could be that they told me all the medical terms as to why it could have died, but I feel like it just wasn't taking anymore.
Gotcha.
And his last kidney transplant that he had, that I was told about when he was, I believe, around 17. He had that also for a couple years, and then it died as well. So I don't
Oh, so
know.
this was his second transplant then.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That was a big turning point of, we did turn to God at that point. I remember feeling his closeness and not quite understanding why. I was questioning why this was the life that was happening now, when
Mm.
I had been so faithful in saying yes and trusting that everything would be okay. And in my young mind, I just felt like that was somewhat the end of life, because I didn't know what that would look for. Would he ever be offered another kidney transplant when he'd already had two that had failed?
Yeah.
Right.
That
Yikes.
was a
Yeah.
bit scary.
That's rough being that young and being faced with that reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then does that mean that he goes back on dialysis again until he can maybe get another kidney or?
Yep. Yes.
Oh, yikes. Were you guys close to like a dialysis center and stuff or?
Yeah, they have a lot of dialysis centers, so we were able to find one near us, and it worked out well. However, his dialysis is like 3 days a week, and it was 4 hours each.
Mhm.
So it's almost like this part-time job that really takes away from being able to provide financially. As well, his body would get sick with headaches that were super excruciating and debilitating. And then he would get queasy quite often. So he would be vomiting. And people at his workplace would be like, why is this kid always vomiting?
Mhm.
So it was a little bit embarrassing for him to be working. I think at the time he was working at Chipotle, to have to go in the back door and vomit and to be able to keep going. But
Wow.
he tried really hard to be able to find a job to also be working along with me, working with insurance and making sure that we were staying afloat, which kind of happened.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah.
So what happened after that news?
Yeah. After we had heard that news, he was told, just live life that you have always lived on dialysis. He had a specific diet that he had to watch and make sure he wasn't eating too much salt and drinking things that weren't good for his body, like Monsters was his favorite thing. So he had to be really careful because his body wasn't filtering things out. And at that time, I felt so lost. I kind of pushed myself away from my family. My brother was on a mission. I stopped emailing him. And I just remember trying to find any type of connection with people, maybe my age. I felt like there were no couples in California married that were the same age as me. I think at this time I was about 20, 21. And I felt super lonely. I remember binge watching TV shows and feeling like those were my friends.
Mhm.
Just felt so alone in the predicament that I was in, and it felt like nothing would change it. And
Right.
this is the point where I started reaching out to male connection within my hospital. And this is where things get a bit muddy, but I felt like it stems from not having the connection with my father growing up. He was not emotionally available for us. And I believe from being able to heal and do lots of work on myself, I was just grasping for that to fill it up after not having that for so long, and also being so lost into, how do I feel connected with myself? How do I figure out who I am? We had stopped going to church. We had stopped doing everything. I feel like his disease really debilitated him, and he had headaches very often. So this left me craving adventure and being able to feel youthful. I felt like as the caretaker, I was constantly going in and out of the emergency rooms with him, or trying to make sure he had what he needed. And then when he couldn't drive, getting him to dialysis. It was just a lot of responsibility that I was not ready for.
Mm-hmm.
And my escape was feeling that rush of dopamine, doing something that you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
This is where I started connecting with two of my coworkers at my hospital. And I realized after the first time it was wrong. And we had gone past a point where it was mostly just text and back and forth. So it was emotionally connecting with someone. And once it got a little further, my bells rang in my head. And I was like, okay, that's it. I talked with Ryan. That was one of the hardest things I've ever experienced, beyond many other things, but having to tell your spouse that you've crossed the line and it's this person that you work with. So you're going to be seeing them every day.
Yeah.
I know he was devastated.
Right.
He said, I know I should have let you date more. I feel bad for getting married when you were so young. And so he was blaming himself, which I was not expecting. I was expecting him to have anger and hate, but he didn't. I mean, he had so much light in him, unconditional love. So when I cut ties with that coworker, I felt lost again. I'm like, well, where am I supposed to find happiness? And of course, I'm not going to church. I'm not doing all the things that could bring this light into my life, because at the time I just didn't feel like I wanted to connect in that way. And this is where the darkness kept taking over. And then I connected with another person who I worked with, and I went through the same cycle over again. It's like throwing a grenade at your husband while you're telling him these things that are so painful and hurtful when they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It was his disease that was overwhelming me. It wasn't him.
Right.
Right.
Gosh. Well, I can see how, especially like being so young and so married, and your brain is in that honeymoon phase, and then when the outside circumstances don't match the inside expectations, how you can feel completely out of place. You know, like this is not what someone, you know, a 20-year-old is supposed to be doing. This is something for like a 60, 70, 80-year-old woman, you know, like that's the wife, you know, or even motherly. I think sometimes too, you know, if you end up having to be a caretaker for a husband, it almost takes you out of that wife role and into that mother role, which can really complicate the intimacy and relationships and, you know, passion and all of those things that as a young bride you were expecting to have. So I can see, you know, how it would be really easy to go and to have this emotional, you know, affair and to just want to be seen in a way where someone can take care of themselves.
Yes.
Where you don't have to be anything except for the person that's being chased, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and from my perspective, it almost feels like you were a prisoner in your own life, and you were so young. You just didn't, and like that would be really hard to be in that situation.
Yeah.
I felt like I wasn't sure what to do to change the situation. I knew there also wasn't much to do except for the obvious, which that came soon after. Now, all of this back and forth, reaching outside of my marriage, that was about 9 months worth of just turmoil and trying to figure out who I was without having the gospel's influence on my life, but always knowing it was true. That's one thing I knew, is I knew the gospel was true no matter what was happening. I just didn't feel like I could live it. So I was living how I was choosing to live. And I learned that wasn't really getting me anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, something else happened that was pretty pivotal. This is about 3.5 years into our marriage. Ryan, my first husband, Ryan dropped me off at the hospital to go to work, and we were making things work. We had made a pact that I would change departments. I brought that up to him. I looked into everything and I found a heart telemetry position that was hiring. So I studied like crazy. I passed the test and I applied to the positions that were available, and I was offered a position. So I felt like light was coming back in and my brain was stimulated in a productive way. I feel like that was also missing when I had dropped out of college way back years before, because Dante was my piece to sign language. And so when we stopped connecting, I didn't feel confident enough to keep going and doing that. So I dropped out. And so my mind, I felt, was understimulated. And that's not good for me. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Over the years, I just have a very active mind. But I was dropped off that morning, and I went about my day. We were sharing a car, and about 1:30, when I was into my shift, I saw my phone, and Ryan texted me. He said, "I miss you, love." And I read it and put it in my pocket. I did not respond. At about 3:30-ish, when I was off my shift, I started calling him, and he wasn't answering. So in my gut, I just knew something was wrong. I just knew. So our neighbor kindly went to our apartment and asked the landlord to open the door, and he was found unconscious in our living room. So I was not there. I was at work, and it conveniently worked out that that was the nearest hospital. So they did bring him to me at the hospital that I worked at. There was just so many swirling feelings that I didn't know what was going on. Was this it? He'd been Superman. Every time he pulled through, there's no way that they were going to tell me that he wouldn't pull through this time. I felt like this was just another one of those times. But then also, I had this overwhelming feeling. His spirit's not in that body. I saw his body come in the stretcher, and all the nurses getting all the wires and the plugs and machines hooked up. It was almost this eerie feeling like he was above it. And I didn't want to believe that, but the doctor waited for my family to come, because I was just there with my neighbor, a 22-year-old girl with a husband lying on a stretcher. He said, "Let me know when your family comes." So when they got there, he said he is brain dead. He's only alive because of this machine. So I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do.
Wow. Oh. Did you guys discuss anything ahead of time as far as like if that were something that happened? Did you know exactly what he wanted?
Yeah, I knew that he was on the donor list. So he was able to donate organs. And that was something that was very beautiful for his mom to be able to experience as well, because they'd gone through a lot with his disease. For me, I was just imagining someone disassembling his body and then all the blood draining out, and he wasn't a person anymore. That was terrifying for me. But I was also grateful that he was able to give different donations to other people, because it's like his legacy lived on. He was able to give back.
Wow. So how long did you guys have to, I guess, keep him on life support before you made that decision to take him off?
I think it was about 3 days, somewhere in between there. His parents didn't have the finances to come to us in California. So I was making a lot of the choices for everything that was happening, and being his wife, that made sense. I just was so overwhelmed, and my dad could see that. Him and I had never had a strong connection, but in that moment, he took over perfectly. He took care of everything that was costly and that needed to be paid for and arranged. And he was able to provide that for me at the perfect time. Wow. And I was super grateful that he was able to have that role, because I'd never seen him break down when I was told Ryan was brain dead. he was devastated. He's like, if I could take the pain away from you, I would. And we had never had that kind of relationship. The walls that I had built up with him were so high that I was almost frustrated that he wanted to be in my life at this time. Over the years, we've been able to work on our relationship. But at that time, I just remember being grateful for him to be willing to step in when I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, sorry. Ooh. You got me going. Oh, man. So you guys were able to say your goodbyes, I assume, right?
Yes, everyone was able to do that. After he was taken off life support, his family was able to eventually get there. Everyone was able to say their goodbyes. And we had the funeral. He was buried in Huntington Beach, up high, just like he liked the airplanes that he always talked about. And that was a beautiful tribute that we were able to give him as well. And that was the end of that. The grief, though, that took over inside of me, knowing that we were fixing things, and I had finally made the choice to actually take my head out of the gutter and move towards the vows that I had agreed to with my husband and with God. I had finally chosen that is going to be the best thing for me, but I can't do it by myself. That's when I finally turned to God, and it was only less than 2 weeks before his death. Wow. So it was really fresh.
Oh, man.
This realization was so fresh. So when I learned he had passed, I felt like God was taking him from me. He's like, you did not deserve my son. So I took him back. Aww. That's how I viewed it that day when I was told that he had passed. And I knew that I had a lot of work to go through. The grief that set inside of me wasn't just because he had passed. It was because of what I did. The choices that I made in my marriage to someone who was doing the best that they could with a disease that obviously they chose from heaven, and he chose me. He chose knowing that I would make those choices. The unconditional love that I realized he had inside of him was immaculate. After I was back with God, knowing that Ryan chose to go through every trial, there's no words. I just know how beautiful of a soul he is. And I'm so grateful that he did choose that, because I was also able to learn beautiful lessons despite the hardships that I had placed on myself and our marriage. I've learned through transformational therapy that we all get to have our journey. It's always our perfect journey. We're going to be learning lots of lessons. And I got to learn a lot of lessons before my next marriage, which brought a lot in and of itself. A lot of beautiful lessons that I got to continue learning. And I was shaping who I was before I got to my second marriage. I didn't know it at the time, but I was really learning who I needed to be before I got to Dante.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So how did that go from that point? How did you get Dante back in your life?
Yeah, Dante found me.
Okay.
Yeah, Facebook. I changed my status to single a while after Ryan had passed, not too much longer. I was just going through the steps of changing all the formalities of what should shift, even my bank account. I remember going in, the teller was not much older than me. And I said, here's my husband's death certificate. I need to take him off my account. And he was so dumbfounded by this 22-year-old girl who had a death certificate of a husband she was already married and he had already passed. And so that was a moment of reflection for me, that I was super young and learning so many things, but I didn't give myself grace at that point. It was just a time of reflection. Now, when Dante reached out, we were already in different states because I had already moved back to California and he was in Utah, our snowy state here. And he reached out and he said, "Hey, I don't know what happened, but I noticed your status changed. So if there's anything I can do, let me know." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, this is cool. I mean, I don't know any sign language anymore. It's all gone." But it was so suppressed inside of me that actually I couldn't talk about sign language for the whole time I was with Ryan. I couldn't even talk about it because it was so sad to me that I couldn't feel like I could do sign language anymore because I just wasn't confident enough.
Wow.
But he brought it back and we started Skyping to age myself a little bit. We Skyped back and forth and we started connecting through text. I was not looking for a long-term relationship. I was just connecting with someone who was so beautiful in my life that I knew had a purpose, but I didn't know he'd come back to my life. I really grieved the fact that I probably wouldn't see him again or talk to him again, really. So when he started talking with me back and forth and this connection came so naturally, it was very odd for me because I felt like I was cheating on Ryan again. I felt like I was now crossing another line, even though he had passed. It's like that carried over into my life still. I just mentally didn't understand where I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to move forward after messing it up so badly.
Right.
But Dante was super patient. He brought his own suppressed childhood, which I didn't know about. But he was very patient with my situation that had happened. And I really confided in him. He knew everything. I told him all the things. As well, I told Ryan all the things. It was extremely sickening and hard to say them. And it was disgusting to have to tell somebody the thoughts that I, had thought of another person outside of my marriage.
Right.
But I disclosed those things to both of them, just knowing that I really, really wanted to move forward. I just didn't really know how in my mind.
Right.
He was kind of this segue into a different life, unplanned.
How did so you did that before you guys started dating or like when you guys were getting serious? Like when did you share all of these things with Ryan?
I
Sorry.
I know, right? I keep I shared with him, I feel like a couple months after we were super connected fast. It may have been trauma bonding. I don't know. I'm sure some of it was. It was pretty quick after, I want to say maybe a couple months. So we weren't super serious, but I'm the type, obviously, I like to share. I've always been that way, except for when I'm in the midst of shame.
Right.
And when I'm outside of that and I've been able to find healing, I do like to share with people who I trust. He was very understanding of what had happened, and he knew of the past that I was bringing into a possibility if we were going to date seriously. And that was never something that was a hard no. I feel like with his own different circumstances of childhood, he also knew that he was going to need someone who was understanding. And I learned more about him as we went on, but
gotcha.
We really connected fast after that in visiting each other. And then things picked up really fast. And a year after that, we got married.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So how much time between Ryan's passing and your second marriage?
About a year.
So literally, like really just almost a year. Wow.
Yeah. It was.
Did you have any reservations marrying someone that was deaf? Like,
good question. My dad,
not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just like, I had a deaf friend growing up, right? I had a deaf friend growing up, and I mean, there was sometimes it was hard to communicate properly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, were there any reservations there? Like,
I feel like I really didn't have reservations as long as I knew I was going to learn the language. However, my dad, this is where he comes in with his concerns. We were on a drive one day, and Dante and I were serious at this point. It was just him and I. He goes, it wasn't that long ago that Ryan passed. He's like, I just bringing it to the front. He goes, and I just worry with you dating another man who can't take care of you. I just don't know how I feel about that. He said, he's deaf. It means that my dad was in the high council and he was able to go to the deaf branch in Riverside. And he said, I've had lots of experiences seeing deaf individuals who also have other multiple disabilities or physical limitations. And he said, I worry that you're not going to get taken care of again.
Yeah.
And I told him, Dante's probably more physically fit than I am. So I'm not worried about the physical part. It's really, I need to learn the language. That was the biggest concern for me because I wasn't fully able to express my emotions. I could spoken or on a text, but being able to really connect with someone deeply, I knew that I had to pick that language up fast. And really being with him, that brought it right back in to where I had to pick it up fast.
Wow. So you were still in California at this point?
Yes.
And then he was still in Utah.
Yes.
So where did you guys meet physically? How did you guys actually start dating together in the same state?
Yeah. So it first started online and then he flew into California. He didn't have money. So I was like, I'll pay for it. I've saved up this money from my job. I just want to see you. He goes, are you sure? No one's paid for anything for me. I said, yeah, who cares? But I was so eager to be able to see him again. And then I finally was comfortable going out of the state of California after so much grief. I finally got to a point a few months after where I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I went to visit him and his family, who I had met back when we were 18. So it was very strange. Like I had vaguely remembered his family, but there had been so many divorces on mom and dad's side that I didn't keep any of the information in my head. But he had a brother who doesn't have autism, but he has a brain, I want to say disorder. I'm not exactly sure what the label is, but he does function as if he would have autism. So Dante always thought he had autism.
Okay.
He never knew that it wasn't the case, but he was Dante's tester. Dante's like, none of my girlfriends have ever really passed the test of my brother and being able to connect with him and not feel like he's just annoying or in the way. But I loved him from the moment that I met him. There was never any doubt. But for him, that was kind of his answer as to I'm really serious about her. There were different things, but that was one of the one factors that was important to him when I went to Utah. Now, he decided then to stay in California for the summer because he had to go back to Utah to finish school. So summer is when I had to decide if I would go back to Utah and the snow or if I wanted to stay at the beach that I'd worked so hard to get to. And it wasn't just a relationship. It was now we got to make a choice to go back in time is how I felt, back to square one. And obviously I decided to go to Utah.
Yeah.
Obviously that was the choice. I got back into sign language, and he was also a person who taught me sign language because we used it obviously every day. So I went back to college and I felt like, okay, I'm going to be the interpreter, the sign language interpreter that I had originally sought out to be. My mind was stimulated. I was so excited to be on this new adventure. We were doing well. I feel like there was always a lot of suppressed grief between the two of us, but we were really good at the honeymoon phase after getting married and just going with the flow of whatever was happening.
Right.
And he It was about a year after we had been married. So we get this trend about a year. And we realized that we were pregnant. Super exciting. But we also were not taught tools to go through our grief. So there's the two of us barely kind of getting through life every day. We're thinking, oh, it's fine. But, you know, in that honeymoon phase, obviously I feel like both of us knew there were things that needed to be healed through, but it was kind of triggering when I talked about Ryan at that point. He didn't really want to hear about it because he wanted to move forward with our life. Right. So I learned to suppress all of that after we got married. And I didn't feel like I needed a therapist. I wish I did go to a therapist, but that was a point in my life that I was still learning. And we learned we were pregnant, not only with one, but with two. That's when we learned we had two heartbeats.
Wow. Throw you in the deep end, huh?
Yeah, starting with fire.
Oh, wow.
It was very shocking to learn that, but we were very excited. As new parents, we did the best we could when we got these two babies and we brought them home. They were all ours, these preemie babies. My mom did stay with us for a little bit. However, a few days in, she said, "Hey, I'm going to be going home." And I said, "Mom, what are you talking about?"
You can't leave me.
No, don't go home.
Yeah.
There's no other grandparents helping us. What do you mean? And I could sense like something was going on, but she wouldn't tell me. She said, "Well, I just feel like you guys are going to be a great team. So I'm going to let you guys do it." And I said, "What do you mean, Mom? Like, you're here. I actually get naps in the day and I can function." She said, I feel like you guys are doing a great job. So I'm going to book my ticket." And she did. I learned real quick that my husband had been very much good at telling her what she was doing wrong, or kind of like wanting her to go to the side because she was burping them wrong or feeding them wrong. I feel like she was alienated and knew that it was just tough for Dante. Yeah. However, for me, it was this woman who I was finally able to have in my house after bed rest for almost 5 weeks. And I finally was having connection with somebody. So it was devastating that this was happening, but I didn't understand at the time, how do we ever get through this? So here's where I'm starting to feel this heaviness again, just sink in my gut. I just don't understand what I'm supposed to do to find happiness. I feel like that's always been what I was trying to find, this happiness and joy that was just not ever coming. Of course, I'm learning in different ways, my own path, but I feel like having twins really rocked our world, and we both weren't having our cups filled. They were both being depleted constantly. And I feel like that's what started the downfall of the next pattern, which is where I, again, kind of had thoughts of other men. However, I didn't reach out to anyone. It was just the thoughts of like, hey, I really want to talk to that person when I see them. And I was noticing these things pop up here and there without acting on anything.
Right.
And as time went on, I noticed this cup was just depleting, and it was so raw. We were not connecting. We weren't functioning except for co-parenting. He was struggling, spending money financially. So I was always resentful of the fact that I felt like I was stuck in Utah because he was not ever able to provide for us, or he was just using our money behind my back. So that was very detrimental for the both of us. I feel like both of us contributed with all this trauma of unhealed pain, and we suppressed it at the same time while trying to raise young kids. This is where the ugly comes in, and this is where I just doubted who I was as a human. At this point, we had my daughter now. So there's 3 young children, almost 3 in diapers. I'd barely got the twins out of diapers before she came. working full time, always providing, working 2-3 jobs sometimes to provide for everyone. He stayed home as Mr. Mom.
Mm-hmm.
Grateful as I was in that tunnel vision of my mind, I felt like, when are you ever going to get a real job? When is this going to be us thriving instead of us always in the negative?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like a lot of it was financial all over again. And that made me feel stuck. I was making this money. I was actually donating eggs to be able to pay off debt. And then to find out that you're spending money again, it was very devastating for me. So that started a huge block in my mind to disconnect from him, because I felt like we were just not making it work.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an individual who came into our life, actually into Dante's life. So he was a mutual person in our life. And this is where I found an emotional connection outside of my marriage, nothing physical. This was the emotional connection that upturned our whole lives. It was, texting back and forth, kind of like flirty, just getting to know you, but things you would do to kind of get to know if you're compatible with somebody.
Right.
But that was enough for a few months, actually a while, back and forth, then cutting things off. And then again, when I felt like my cup was too depleted, I would reach back out to this person. Finally, it got to a point where I just knew I either needed to end things in my marriage, or I needed to figure out what was going on with me. Because I still didn't understand who I was. My self-worth was in the garbage.
Right.
It was so low at this point that I was doing this thing again that totally destroyed me. Why didn't I learn the first time? This is a common, why didn't I learn that first time when you put yourself through all that pain? I feel like the dopamine addiction to something that you're so in tune with, when you get that hit again, that excitement, you're like, oh my gosh, I know what that feels like. I really want that.
Mm-hmm.
What I felt with that rush of excitement in connecting with a male outside of my marriage, and getting that when I needed or wanted that, was like a reward. So I felt like I was rewarding myself each time I was able to connect and get a reaction or a response. Now, I got to the point where I finally knew I needed to tell Dante that I had been hiding, an emotional connection with this person that he worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And that made it really tough, because he worked closely with this person and I did not. I was just the wife. When he learned that this was all in my head, and I had doubts about our marriage and thought about other males just in my head or connected with them through work, this all came out all almost at once. It was a lot for him to handle.
Mm-hmm.
Handle it like Ryan. Everyone handles it differently. I was struggling to even tell him all of it at once. I felt like I had to tell him in pieces because it was just so heavy for me. I almost couldn't spit out all the details because I didn't even know where to start too. It gets blurry when you're doing things that you probably, you obviously know you shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And it was very, very devastating when he found out. We went through a lot of separation physically, a lot of back and forth. And then it finally got to the point where our bishop offered to assist with therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Where it all finally finds light. We finally find some light here. Now, we needed a therapist who signed fluently, because Dante did not want to have an interpreter mediating the message back and forth, because that could have tweaked what was going on and made it worse.
Yep.
And that was pretty much why he didn't want to go to therapy for a long time. So we didn't have what he felt he needed to be heard correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So once this service was offered, we dug, and we dug really deep. It took years. He, in the beginning, would say comments like, I just don't feel like this is working. And I was like, no, I just know this is working. Please, no. And it took a lot more sessions for him to really feel like the therapist wasn't against him or siding with me, those types of things. And that gave him the ability to finally heal through his childhood, which were actually the things that bled into our marriage.
Right.
Since we hadn't healed from our past, we just brought all of that into this marriage with kids. And kids just highlight your struggles and your weaknesses. They make things worse. We're the ones that brought it into our marriage. And we didn't know that until we finally went to therapy.
Wow. You know, I remember going to this like marriage conference or whatever, because my husband and I had a really rough, decade plus of our own marriage. Very similar to yours, where we just felt super disconnected. We didn't think that we could do anything. I, would emotionally connect with someone that I wasn't supposed to be emotionally connecting with. And it was like really, really tough for a long time. So we went to this marriage seminar hoping that, that it would fix things and it would help a little bit, but it was never deep enough to fix everything. But I remember at one point they had this visual representation of like what happens when we bring our unhealed trauma and our hurt and our baggage and all the things into a marriage. And so they had this couple, and on the couple, they had a bunch of like strips of paper with words written in like black Sharpie marker, like abandonment, right? Obesity, like low self-esteem, sexual abuse, like whatever it was that they were bringing into it. And I remember they got up on stage and they started taking their strips off and putting it onto each other. And they just kept putting it onto each other. And then all of a sudden, this is the part that really got me. Then all of a sudden they called the children up of the couples, and the couples started taking it off of each other and sticking it on the kids.
Wow.
And it was like this powerful, like, I was just like, oh my gosh, this moment of clarity for me where I was like, I have to heal myself. Like, I can keep blaming him, I can keep blaming my husband, and I can keep saying, well, it's because you did this or you're not doing that or da da da. But if I don't take care of what's on me, it is just going to stick on everybody. And then when those two kids, like when those kids grow up, they're going to take all of his and all of mine, and then all of their own that they developed from having all of those, stuck to themselves. They're going to do the same thing over and over again. So it was so powerful knowing, like, one, that I have to take responsibility for me. Like, I can easily read all his words that he has stuck to him. I can read all of his baggage, right? Like, I think it's very easy for us to point out all the things wrong with everybody else. But for me to take them off myself and to look at them and be like, okay, I'm holding on to this. I don't want to stick it on anybody else. So what do I have to do to get rid of this completely? How can I transform what's on me now? And I think that's kind of where the atonement comes in full force. I love therapy. I love life coaching. I love, reading the self-help books and doing all of the work. But I almost feel like none of it is complete until you include the atonement. Yeah. So can I ask kind of, and I guess it's more of a sacred question maybe, and if it's not okay, that's okay. You don't have to answer, but did you have an experience where you felt like you needed to reach out to the Savior, like where you really had to figure out what the atonement was for you to move forward from all of the things you were carrying in the marriage?
Yeah, I felt like a huge piece of that was first being honest with my partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was honest in therapy. But Ryan was with me throughout my healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
pretty much, he's always been with me. Obviously, he's with me. He healed, oh, he healed parts of me that I never knew could be healed from someone on the other side. His love, I feel like, healed a big part of me, connecting me with my Savior, because he was a living example of someone who would take these trials and say, I can do it because I love her that much. So feeling his love, even past the veil, in moments of excitement and accomplishment, he would be there through music. I connect with him through music. During certain moments, I'll hear a song and I'm like, yep, I know, Ryan. I know you're here. Thank you so much. I do. I talk to him out loud. I feel like that healing with him has connected me to my Savior. And I've learned to pray more and actually have those conversations with my Savior, my brother. I learned that only through examples of people able to love me, and then me to be able to love myself. If I didn't love myself, I would not be able to connect with my Savior in a way that I can now. I had to learn to love me. I was made from God. He made me. He made my brother, my Savior. He made all of us from his light. Until I finally could feel that in the depths of my soul, knowing that I had let out all the secrets, I'd repented. On my knees many times throughout different processes, going through that repentance process with Ryan, with Dante, and then by myself. It was a long, long journey, but I feel like the ultimate goal of being here on the earth is, yes, to be perfect, but we do have to go through our life lessons, and we do get to choose. We get to choose if we want to stay stuck forever, or we get to choose to be brave and be uncomfortable and get out of the situation and the habits, the coping mechanisms that are keeping us trapped. For me, it was sharing my story. Sharing my story first with the truths of it, with my spouse, and then with my mom, and then with different people, my therapist, trusted friends. Sharing that story of what happened strengthened me to realize that I am not shame. I am not all these things that, like you meant, I stuck on myself. So I chose to take them off. And it took lots and lots of trainings and really just digging deep into who I am and what God made me for. And a big part of that is my patriarchal blessing. He said, live your life that you may be, as you are a light upon a hill to others whom you may associate. But you have to live to be that light. Wow. And so that always stuck with me. I was like, if I keep living this type of life, I will not get that light. And I didn't realize that until I had gone through all the healing and felt that I was worthy. I was now worthy to be that light that he had made me to be this whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, I really like your story because, when we go through life and we make mistakes, we would like, I think human nature is, we want to, when we do go through the repentance process and it's sincere, we'd like to think that we've learned the lesson, that we're never going to make that same mistake, right? but we do, right? Like, we're human. And so I like, first of all, like, you have a lot of guts to come on and share your story. So I appreciate that. Because I think that'll help a lot of people, but also that when we make the same mistake again, God is going to be there. We're going to still be forgiven for that. And we can be pure. We can be clean, and life is just a school. We're learning, right? And, we can fail over and over and over again, but eventually, every time, God will forgive us. but also we will get better. We will learn and we'll grow and we'll become more like
Yes.
Christ.
Wow.
Yeah. I agree.
So can I ask, where does that take us? I mean, you guys went through this years of work and how are things now,
Yeah. I feel like we separately have been able to love who we are. And that was key. Each of us healing through everything that we deserve to heal through. And then we were able to connect deeply with each other without walls. It was like living with dirty glasses and telling myself that's as good as it's going to get. So you better accept it. However, after taking those off, doing the healing, doing all the things that let me see my self-worth, I put on these new glasses that were so clear. And it was the accountability that I took for myself. That's what it was. The accountability of everything that I choose to do or feel. So nothing ever gets shifted to him. I always choose how I feel or how I respond. With me taking that accountability, I've noticed we've been able to truly connect on a deeper level, being able to feel that connection beyond the veil instead of just searching for this earthly connection that may or may not work out.
Right.
So being able to truly connect with ourselves first has been able to bridge that gap of what we were not understanding. Why are we not clicking? Why are these things happening and we're pushing each other away all the time?
Right.
It's because we didn't have him. God was not in that marriage when we were choosing to do things our own way because we weren't choosing him. He was waiting. He was just like, hey, I'm here, but you don't want me over there. So I'm not going to force it. I will wait until you choose me and you know that I'm always here. And I knew that once I was truly able to go through enough healing on my own, we were able to really bridge the gap of what our family was missing. And I feel like that regrowth, this livened life that we've been able to recreate was really the start of when we moved to Florida. That's where we've really flourished, and we worked as a team and a family. We've discussed therapy with our kids. We've discussed and pointed out mom and dad's weaknesses. I've actually sat down with my twin boys and I let them know what mommy chose to do in her past. And that's what the book is about, because they never really understood what book I was writing. They've always seen me write since they were born, but they didn't understand what I was actually writing. And Dante said, you need to talk to them because they're at the right age.
Yeah.
So that was a really tough conversation, but I got to show the boys that I grew up with a mother that I didn't really know. She was on robot mode, and I didn't know her till she was an adult, and she's still trying to find herself and who she is. I don't want to be that mom.
Yeah.
I want you to know that I own my mistakes and I'm okay with them. I'm okay that I started here and now I'm over here. You're allowed to do that too. I just want my kids to give themselves grace that I didn't feel like I gave myself or felt like I was allowed to have when I kept falling short of the standards.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that in and of itself is such a huge step towards healing the next generation. Like when we work on ourselves, we instantly have less that we're going to put on, our kids and our grandkids and so on and so forth. And just giving them that space to mess up,
Yes.
like just letting them know, like, I'm still here. I still love you. And, yes, like sometimes we're going to do dumb stuff. Sometimes we're going to do it repetitively, like sometimes that's going to happen. But the best thing that you really can do is take responsibility for it.
Right.
Regardless of the outside circumstances, regardless of how many factors played a role, at the end of the day, when we take responsibility for our part in it, regardless of what else happened, I think that we take so much power back in being able to move forward and to heal and to, develop that love that I think really that comes down to it, right? Like it's tapping into the love that our Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ already have for us,
Yes.
and being able to feel that and accept it, right? Because I think a lot of us know that it's there,
Yeah.
but we don't accept it because we're so hard on ourselves, and we just think there's no way. Right.
Right.
But
Right.
wow.
Yep. I would agree
Yeah.
100%.
So you've been writing this memoir. When did you decide to turn it into a book?
This memoir was my therapy. I feel like this is where I told all my secrets to. This is how I processed what I was doing and who I was in my own world. And because I was able to say whatever I wanted and turn it into a solid story that manifested over 8 years, and it turned itself with lots of feedback, lots of eyes on it. It's turned itself into a solid shaped book. But the hard part is getting a literary agent to grasp onto that, and you have to have a platform when you want to sell a memoir. So that's been what we've been doing. And my platform has been Instagram, where we have thousands and thousands of followers on there, but it took a long time.
Yeah.
And I knew that this was the feedback that I keep getting, is you need to grow your story and your platform. And I've been really passionate about doing that alongside my family. They've been able to really support that. And that's where it grew, is when my family started wanting to be involved with my videos. And I feel like, yes, you have to look at the numbers, but it's not even about that for me. I just really, truly want to get my book out there. I just want to be able to find what the path is of what it's supposed to be, and be able to share the story in a solid, method.
Yes.
Someone to be able to see, oh, I've struggled with that, or, okay, I'm not the only one who's gone through this difficult journey, whether they're LDS or not. My story is, there's so many people that struggle with infidelity, and especially emotional infidelity for women these days.
Yes.
It's very much shamed because it's a very hurtful thing, and it's very hard to discuss in public platforms. I've shared it in little bits and pieces as I could on social media, but being able to share it in a trusted environment is very, very important to me, because I just want other people out there to know you don't have to live in shame the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You do get to heal through it, and you don't have to have that label. That's not who you are. Those are just the choices that you've made in your life that you get to heal from.
Right.
If you choose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let us know. I mean, so you're saying right now your book isn't out for people to grab, right? You're in that process of getting it picked up and all the things. But your Instagram is there. So if they wanted to look you up and support you and help you out, where do they go?
I am Salty, SALTY, self-love on Instagram. That is my main platform. I also have my website, which holds other pieces of information of how to reach out to me. And that's just my name. So it's www.sheriramirez.com.
Perfect. That's so fun. We're like kindred spirits. Like mine's the salted beauty, you know, and it's like not salty like a bad thing. It's like a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're two souls here.
I love that. I love it.
Oh, awesome. Well, Sheri, do you have any last thoughts? Anything that you'd like to share last minute before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I feel the last message that I'd like to share is truly to reach out to the hearts of others who are struggling with shame and who are struggling with their self-worth. Just know that your choices are not who you are. If I can have two husbands who can unconditionally love me beyond everything I've done, that's a testament to God and Jesus that they love you that much. And it's just you choosing to love yourself, because they're always there. It's just a matter of you wanting to reach out to them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Miss Sheri, for coming on today, for lighting the world with your story. I definitely agree with, everything that was said in your patriarchal blessing, that you have a voice and you have a light to you that I think can do a lot of good and can help bring a lot of people into that light. So thank you so much for being you and for coming on here today. And thank you so much to all of our listeners, guys. We would so greatly appreciate it if you guys wanted to hit that share button, do that 5-minute or 5-second missionary work that Scott talks about us doing all the time, and just get this episode out to others who might need to hear it. There were so many really good nuggets today. And, I still have some makeup on, but I definitely did cry. I've learned to just stop putting eyeliner and mascara on the bottom there, and I cry with my eyes open like this. But yeah, so we would love to have you guys, share this story today. All right. Well, anything else, Scott?
Nope. Really appreciate you being on the show, Sheri.
Thank you.
Man, you've got a lot of guts, and but you have, like Alicia said, you have a great spirit about you, and you have a light, and I'm glad that we get to help you share that a little bit.
Thank you for having me on. Truly,
yeah.
I was so excited for this because a lot of what I do is I don't fully talk about the LDS religion because I want it to reach a general public as much as possible. So it's very healing to be able to share the big connections that I've had with my religion. So this has been extremely important for me. So I'm just super grateful for you guys.
Oh, well, we're happy that we, had the opportunity to let you do that. So.
I truly appreciate it.
All right. Well, guys, that's all that we have for you today. Remember, if you guys have a story that you'd like to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others, we would love to hear from you. Go ahead and head over to latterdaylights.com. You can fill the form out at the bottom of the page, or you can leave a comment for us, send us a private message on Facebook. We would be more than happy to hear more stories out there and more testimonies. It all does good things. So don't be shy. Reach out to us and make sure you share this episode of Latter-day Lights. And until then, we will see you next week. All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.